I stood in my newly renovated apartment, running my hand over the freshly painted wall, feeling the smooth surface under my fingers, slightly roughened by layers of expensive paint, shimmering in the light of the crystal chandelier sparkling above the dining area, and looking around. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for everything I had achieved by the time I was 27. By years, finally, I created the house that has always been in my dreams, a place where every piece of furniture, from dark wood parquet floors to carefully selected furniture, spoke about my independence, my success, and my right to a life that I achieved on my own, thanks to many years of work in an investment company and, if to be completely honest, I inherited from my father, who gave me the freedom I dreamed of. And now, holding a silver tray with delicious snacks in my hands, I tried not to think about how questionable my decision to invite people here was, with whom I had too many painful memories, my mother and my stepsister Sarah. I could feel the anxiety growing inside me as I set the wine glasses on the table, trying to make everything perfect, but even the most beautiful glasses, even the most expensive snacks, could not drown out the voice of the past in my head, reminding me of who Sarah was to me. The one who seemed to find pleasure in destroying everything I loved, who shamelessly turned my life into chaos while my mother looked on with endless condescension and a tired shrug, and the memories came flooding back to me so abruptly that I froze for a moment, clutching the glass tighter in my hands. Then I poured red wine, remembering how I received my first art set from my father when I was a child. A box of expensive paints and brushes that had become precious to me, and how just a couple of days later I discovered that Sarah had easily poured paint on the carpet in my room, leaving indelible stains, and then, a few more days later, she managed to paint the walls with my brand new brushes, and when I came sobbing hoping for justice, my mother just looked at me wearily and said her standard phrase, "She's a child, Sophia, she doesn't know anything." But Sarah knew. She always knew what she was doing, and it happened over and over again. Ruined things, ruined moments, ruined memories, and it seemed to give her special pleasure to watch me try to protect what was important to me, because she knew that in the end no one would take my side, that my mother would always find a way to justify her actions, even when she ripped open with scissors my favorite sweater, given to me by my father for Christmas, even when she accidentally spilled juice on my hard-earned science project on the eve of graduation, even when she overstepped the boundaries over and over again, and I remained the one who was supposed to be understanding and not so dramatic. The worst part wasn't even Sarah's behavior, but how easily her mother refused to set any boundaries for her, how condescendingly she looked at the fact that there were rules and consequences in my life that I had to adhere to, while Sarah seemed to live in complete freedom, without responsibility, without remorse, without the burden that I carried on my shoulders. And at some point, when I turned 14, I realized that I no longer wanted to be a part of this family. I no longer wanted to clench my teeth and hold back tears. I no longer wanted to live in a place where I was not appreciated. And I packed up my things and went to my father, changing my life forever. I still remember the look on my mother's face at that moment. She didn't look upset, she looked furious, because she understood that she was losing not so much her daughter as the financial support she was receiving from my father. And after that we didn't talk for a long time, and my life finally began to take on the meaning that I so missed, because my father not only supported me, but also helped me grow up, taught me how to understand finances, inspired me, showing me that I deserved more than the role of an eternal patient observer of other people's whims. And when he died during my college studies, it felt like the ground was slipping away from under my feet, but at the same time I knew that he had left me not only financially independent, but also the inner strength that allowed me to become who I am now. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts, and I felt tension rise in my chest. The first guests had already arrived, but fortunately, they weren't the ones I was afraid to see, but my aunt and uncle, and when I opened the door, their warm smiles instantly eased my anxiety, making me feel less alone in this house full of memories, and soon the apartment was filled with guests, voices laughing, glasses clinking. Everyone admired my new home, my kitchen with marble countertops, my elegant living room, my successes, and I caught their admiring glances, rejoicing that this day could go well, that perhaps all my fears were in vain. But as soon as I heard the approaching sound of stilettos, everything inside me tightened again, because I already knew who it was. I knew the sound. I knew how it made my heart slow down and my fingers involuntarily clench into a fist, and when I turned around, they were standing there, my mother in her smart dress. Gorgeous, with a familiar smile that always seemed a little mocking to me, and Sarah in a dress that looked like it was painted right on her, emphasizing every curve of her figure, and on her face was the same smirk that I remembered from childhood. The party had been going on for over an hour, and everything was going exactly as I wanted. Light jazz filled the space with a soft rhythm. The guests were engrossed in conversations, laughing, sharing stories and enjoying wine, and the silver trays with delicious snacks emptied with each new social circle, creating that elegant, calm evening that I had been having for so long planned it. The soft light of the chandelier reflected in the glasses, giving everything a touch of comfort and warmth, and I was already beginning to think that maybe my concern was in vain, that this evening would pass without incident, until I heard that voice that could always spoil any mood for me. "Oh my God," Sarah announced loudly, her voice like a knife blade cutting through the soft hum of conversation, causing many of the guests to turn around. "Is this a party or a retirement home?" Silence hung in the room, the air was filled with tension, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks, but I forced myself not to react, just to watch as my stepsister, frozen in the doorway, wrinkled her nose, looking around with an expression of undisguised contempt. Aunt Raimonda froze in mid-sentence, her glass of wine froze in the air, and friends and relatives looked at each other awkwardly, not knowing how to react to such a rude attack. However, no one laughed. No one supported her joke. I gritted my teeth, trying to stay calm until Sarah finally took a step inside. She had been here many times, but now, for the first time since the renovation, she looked around the apartment with a new look, and I saw how her expression changed. She ran her hand over the smooth surface of the granite countertop in the kitchen, studied the designer lamps, glanced into other rooms, and then returned to me, and I instantly recognized it was the look she got every time my father did something for me, whether it was my first car, paid college tuition, or just the sincere support she needed. At that moment, I realized that jealousy was literally eating her up from the inside out. Then a smile appeared on her face, the one that made my insides go cold because I knew all too well what was behind it. "This place is amazing, Sophia," she said, and then, tilting her head to the side, she added with undisguised self-satisfaction, "I've decided that I'm moving here next week." I laughed, genuinely thinking it was a joke, but Sarah didn't even flinch. "I'm serious," she said, and her tone was icy. "This place is too big for you alone, and to be honest, you owe me. You got everything from your father, and I got nothing." "Sarah," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "you'll never move here. This is my home." Her face contorted with rage, and she literally exploded. "You're selfish," she screamed, and several of the guests flinched at her unexpected attack. "Do you think you're the best because Dad left you money? You're living in this gorgeous apartment while Mom and I are barely coping." I expected my mother to step in, try to calm her down, maybe feel ashamed at least because of the guests, but instead she stepped forward, crossed her arms over her chest, and looked at me with a cold reproach that made my insides turn cold. "Sophia," she said, shaking her head, "I can't believe how greedy you are. Is it really hard for you to help your sister? Should I give her a place to stay after everything our family has been through?" I felt something dangerous boiling up inside me. "Our family?" I asked, and my voice was shaking, not from fear, but from the rage that had been building up in me for years. "Family, where did you let Sarah torture me while you just turned a blind eye to it? A family where you never took my side? How dare you?" The mother gasped, her eyes flashed with indignation. "Come on, Sarah, we're leaving. Obviously, your sister cares more about her fancy apartment than her own family." Sarah turned around and ran out, almost knocking over a vase, and my mother followed her, pausing only for a moment at the door to give me a look full of disappointment, the same way she looked at me when I went to live with my father. Then the door slammed shut, and there was dead silence. And then, like a collective exhalation, the tension subsided, and the guests began to quietly discuss what had happened. Aunt Raimonda came up to me and squeezed my hand. Her eyes were full of sympathy, but she didn't say anything, and I was grateful for that, because the last thing I wanted were comforting words. People gradually returned to their conversations, jazz started playing in the air again, and the evening seemed to return to its usual course, but I couldn't feel the same way anymore. After this disaster, I threw myself into my work, hoping that the endless reports, projects, and calls would allow me to forget that evening, forget Sarah's outburst, forget my mother's accusations that echoed in my head. But no matter how much I immersed myself in business, this feeling did not go away, the oppressive realization that I would always be a stranger to them, that despite all my successes, I would never receive any recognition, gratitude, or simple understanding from them. Then, about a month after the party, my boss called me into his office. "Sophia, we need you to personally handle the contract," he said, putting the folder on the table, his voice sounding serious. "This is a big deal. 2 weeks in Milan to sort everything out." I nodded, already mentally preparing for the trip. Business trips have long been an integral part of my work, and to be honest, the prospect of spending 2 weeks away from the city, where every chance encounter with Sarah or Mom threatened to spoil my mood, seemed to me a real relief. That evening, I sent my mom a short message: "I'm going to Milan for 2 weeks for work." Just for the record. I didn't expect much of an answer, but the complete silence still hurt me. Ever since the party ended, Mom had apparently been waiting for me to apologize, as if I had anything to apologize for. The 2 weeks in Milan turned out to be exhausting. Endless meetings, long contract negotiations, late nights spent checking documents, and in rare moments of silence, a hollow, aching feeling of emptiness that I tried to drown out with work. By the time I boarded the plane, all I could think about was my couch, a glass of wine, and an evening of silence in my perfectly appointed apartment where no one would be able to bother me. But the first sign that something had gone wrong was the faint smell of alcohol and cigarettes that I felt when I went out to my floor. My hallway has never smelled like this. I frowned as I inserted the key into the lock, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw inside. The apartment was in chaos. The floor was strewn with empty bottles and cigarette butts, the walls were stained with sticky splashes, wine, beer, something else, and there were burn marks on the floor. The furniture looked as if a herd of drunken buffaloes had walked over it. Pillows were scattered in the most inappropriate places. One of the chairs in the living room was broken. The coffee table was strewn with dried crumbs and something that looked suspiciously like spilled sauce. I stood in the doorway, looking around at the mess. My heart was pounding in my chest. The TV, which I bought just 2 months ago, was smashed, huge cracks cut through its screen, glass fragments scattered all over the floor. I slowly moved deeper into the apartment, feeling my hands start to shake with anger. The kitchen was in even worse condition, a mountain of dirty dishes in the sink, sticky stains on the marble countertops, and takeaway boxes covered with mold were sitting right on the bar. But the worst was ahead of me. When I pushed open my bedroom door, I saw Sarah sprawled on my bed, her hair disheveled, makeup smeared on her face, and the expensive snow-white sheet stained with food and drink stains. She didn't even take off her shoes, just sprawled out on my bed like it was some kind of cheap motel. Something inside me broke. I flew up to her, grabbed her by the shoulders and started shaking her, hissing in rage. "What the hell did you do to my house?" Sarah stirred, not immediately understanding what was happening, then lazily waved me away like an annoying fly. "Oh, relax, Sophia," she murmured, yawning. "Relax? Relax?" I turned around, went into the bathroom, got a glass of ice water and, without hesitation, threw it right in her face. Sarah screamed and jumped up, spitting and cursing incoherently. "Are you sick?" "Stop it," she yelled, wiping her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara on her cheeks. "Stop shouting and tell me what the hell you're doing here. How did you get inside in the first place?" My voice was flat but icy. Sarah wiped herself with a pillow, sprawled out on the bed again, and said with an impudent grin, "Mom gave me a spare key." My breath caught in my throat. What? I whispered. Well, yes, Sarah continued lazily. She said I could stay here while you're gone. But your apartment was so boring, so luxurious, so dead. That's why I invited my friends. I looked at her, feeling all the emotions I had ever felt towards her: anger, resentment, disappointment, merge into one deafening, suffocating lump inside me. I gave my mom the spare key many years ago, shortly after Dad's death, when I was still too naive to think that she would ever be able to betray me. I did it, just in case, as she said at the time, assuring me that she would never use it without my knowledge. But she handed it to Sarah. I slowly closed my eyes, trying to control my anger. Out, I said softly, but threateningly. What? Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. I opened my eyes and looked at her. Get out of my house. Right now. Sarah grinned, her face contorted into a contemptuous grimace. Oh, come on, Sophia, don't be such a bore. We just had some fun. Relax. I pointed at the devastation around us, feeling a wave of rage and helplessness rising inside, ready to spill out. You completely trashed my house. My voice was low, but ringing with pent-up emotions. Look at this place. The walls, the furniture, my TV. Sarah shrugged her shoulders, not even trying to hide her absolute indifference to my outrage, and lazily reached for her phone, which was lying on the bedside table. We had parties, she drawled defensively, though there was no remorse in her voice. A little wild, so what? You have money, you can just buy new things. Get out. I clenched my fists so as not to scream, not to destroy all this chaos in my own apartment, not to grab my sister by the shoulders and push her out the door. Get out of my apartment right now. She sighed theatrically and flopped back onto my bed, continuing to flick through the feed on her phone indifferently. I like it here. Mom said I can stay, and I'm staying. Get over it. I didn't answer. She inhaled, then exhaled and, clenching her teeth, took out her phone, quickly dialing her mother's number. She answered on the third ring, and I, trying not to lose my temper, said in an icy voice. Come here. Immediately. Look what your precious Sarah has done to my apartment. 28 minutes later, yes, I counted, the front door opened and Mom came in, surveying the scene in front of her. I watched her face intently, trying to catch at least a glimmer of realization, at least the slightest regret. Stained walls, ruined furniture, bottles, dirt, the apartment looked like a hurricane had passed through it. But Mom's expression remained unchanged. That's what your daughter did to my house. I ran my hand through the chaos, trying to keep my voice steady, but I still broke down on the last words. The house my father left me. The house I just invested a fortune in for renovation. And you gave her the key. Without even asking me. Mom calmly took an empty bottle of wine, carefully placed it on the table and adjusted the crookedly hanging picture frame with a familiar gesture. I don't understand why you're so upset. Her voice was annoyingly calm. Well, they had a few parties. You have more than enough money to fix everything. It doesn't seem like a situation you can't handle. I stared at her, speechless. At that moment, I finally realized what I probably should have realized many years ago. She will always choose Sarah. No matter what. No matter how she behaves, no matter who she offends, no matter what destruction she leaves behind, Mom will always justify her, protect her, demand that I give up, give more, close my eyes and accept everything as it is. Take Sarah and get out, I said, clenching my hands into fists. Both of you will leave my apartment immediately. Mom leisurely settled down on my ruined couch, pushing the cigarette butts aside. Actually, I think it might be good for both of you, she said with a small smile, as if offering me the perfect way out. Sarah needs somewhere to stay, and you have enough space. Could you live together, improve your relationship? Fix our relationship? I couldn't help but laugh, even though there wasn't a drop of humor in that laugh. Are you serious? She broke into my house and trashed it. I didn't break in, Sarah snapped, leaning back in her chair. I had a key. The key you weren't supposed to get. I could feel myself, control slipping away. This is my house. My father left it to me. Not for you. Not for you. Mom just shook her head, and in her eyes I could read all the same disappointment that I had seen for years. Sophia, you're being overly dramatic. If you don't leave right now, I said, pulling out my phone, I'm going to call the police. Sarah threw back her head and burst out laughing. Mom joined her, both of them looking at me with mockery, like a moody child threatening to lead the house over a trifle. Come on, Sarah smirked. What will you tell them? That your sister used the key and threw a couple of parties? I silently pulled out my phone, dialed 911, and held it to my ear. Sarah's grin faltered. She expected me to be bluffing. What happened to you? I need the police at the address. My voice was steady, calmer than I actually felt. Someone has illegally entered my house and refuses to leave it. Less than 5 minutes later, there was a loud knock on the door. I opened it, and 2 officers stood in front of me, a tall man with graying hair and a young woman with a tight bun on her head. Officer Morelli, Officer Pavisi, the woman said. We received a call about illegal entry. I let them in, watching their eyes widen as they assessed the condition of my apartment. The smell of alcohol, mustiness, and tobacco smoke hit them even before they stepped inside. Officer Morelli, a tall man with graying temples, was the first to cross the threshold, taking a quick but careful look at the overturned furniture, stained walls, and a carpet littered with cigarette butts. He was followed by his partner, Officer Pavisi, a trim young woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. This is my house, I began, barely able to keep the tremor out of my voice, which was more out of rage than fear. I was on a business trip for 2 weeks. My mother gave the key to my sister without my permission. Now she lives here, throws parties, trashes my stuff, and refuses to leave. You're arrogant, Sarah hissed, jumping up from her chair, but Officer Pavisi deftly stepped between us, cutting off any possibility of conflict. Ma'am, calm down. Her voice was firm but not rude, while Sarah responded with a torrent of curses that would probably have made even a seasoned old captain blush. You can't arrest me. Stop it, she shouted, her voice trembling not so much from fear as from rage. It's my sister's fault for being selfish, rich. Officer Morelli, who had maintained his outward composure up to this point, silently took out the handcuffs and stepped towards her, not letting her finish the stream of accusations. He began to read her rights, his voice steady, honed by years of service. What? Sarah staggered back, but Officer Pavisi took her elbow as her partner snapped metal bracelets on her wrists. What the hell? Yes, you are. You have no right. You refuse to leave someone else's property after the owner's explicit prohibition, and you have also caused significant damage to the property, Morelli explained calmly. This is a completely legitimate reason for detention. How dare you? Mom jumped up, throwing off her former mask of calm and diplomacy, finally realizing that the matter was taking a serious turn. Are you arresting your own sister? You are a vile, ungrateful creature. I should have known that you would become as cold and heartless as your father. Her words sounded like a slap in the face. I froze, feeling something inside snap completely. Mom ran out after Sarah, shouting threats at the police, saying she would immediately call the family lawyer and deal with this mess. When the door closed behind them, there was a deafening silence. I slowly looked around the ruined apartment, where once every piece was chosen with love, where I was so proud to complete the renovation. Only now it had all turned into ruins, stained walls, smashed furniture, hundreds of minor damages, and the smell of stale alcohol and tobacco made me sick. I walked through the rooms, taking notes on my phone, figuring out how much it would cost me to repair the damage. The TV, the furniture, the repainting of the walls, the costs were enormous. I could call an appraiser, record everything, and sue Sarah. I could spend months, maybe even years, demanding compensation from her for the destruction. But looking at this list, I suddenly realized what I really didn't want. I didn't want any more arguments with Sarah. I didn't want to meet her in the courtroom, listen to her endless excuses, see her smug grin. I didn't want to keep reminding myself of what had happened. I deleted the list. Instead, I made the only call that really mattered. Round-the-clock emergency locksmith, I'm listening. I need to change all the locks immediately. My voice was calm, firm. A week has passed. I thought Mom wouldn't get in touch. I was wrong. Her name flashed on the phone screen, and as soon as I saw it, I almost instinctively reached out to hang up the call. But something inside stopped me. I pressed the answer button. Sophia, we need to talk. Her voice was softer than usual. Almost peaceful. About what? I asked coldly. Let's meet at the cafe tomorrow at noon, she suggested. I think it's time to discuss everything that happened. I wasn't sure I wanted to have this conversation. But deep down, there was still a foolish hope. Maybe Mom finally realized she was wrong. Maybe she wants to apologize. Okay, I replied after a short pause. I'll be there. The next day, I entered the cafe exactly at the appointed time. Mom was already sitting at a corner table, with expensive dishes in front of her, lobster salad, pasta with truffles, and a bottle of expensive wine. I felt something inside me tense up. I just ordered water. Sophia, dear, she began, dabbing her lips with a napkin. We need to talk. About what? About the severe psychological trauma you inflicted on your sister. I almost choked on the water. What? Do you have any idea what you've done? She continued, her voice sounding reproachful, but there was a strange businesslike quality to it. Sarah spent several hours at the station. A few hours. All her friends know about it. She's completely devastated. Mom shook her head, as if she truly regretted what had happened. The only way to fix this, she continued, leaning closer, is if you apologize to her and compensate her. I blinked, trying to figure out if I'd misheard. Compensation? Yes. $25,000. The fork fell out of my hands, hitting the edge of the plate with a thud. Are you kidding? That makes sense, she said, leaning back in her chair. It will help Sarah cope with the stress she has been through. I sat there, stunned, silent for a moment, and then the words poured out of me. Are you serious? Sarah broke into my house, threw a wild party, destroyed thousands of dollars worth of property, and you think I should pay her? Mom waved her hand dismissively, as if dismissing my words as something unimportant, unworthy of discussion. Oh, don't be so materialistic, Sophia. Well, she threw a few parties, broke a couple of things. You're rich, you can easily replace everything she needs to feel better after you've done such damage to her. I stared at her in disbelief. What kind of damage? My voice cracked with bitter laughter. Do you even hear what you're saying? Sarah destroyed my apartment, and you're acting like I took something away from her. Mom just shrugged her shoulders and casually reached for a glass, took a small sip of wine. Don't be so selfish, dear. She had to go through an arrest, spend several hours in the police station, and now all her friends know about this shame. You do understand how it feels for her, don't you? She's devastated. Is she devastated? I felt like everything was boiling inside. Sarah caused mayhem in my house, broke in without permission, refused to leave, and now I have to feel sorry for her because her friends saw that she bore at least some responsibility for her actions? Mom shook her head, as if disappointed by my insensitivity. The only way to fix everything is to apologize to her and pay compensation. I think $25,000 should cover her emotional damage. I almost choked on the water. Do you want me to pay Sarah $25,000? I said it slowly, syllabically, trying to make sense of the absurdity of what was happening. Mom nodded calmly. Yes, that should be enough for her to feel that you're sorry. She picked up a napkin from the table, dabbed her lips, then stood up, giving me her disconcertingly light smile. Oh, and be a good girl, pay the bill. I know how much you like to show off your wealth. With that, she turned around and left the cafe, leaving me sitting at a table covered with plates of barely touched food. There was a receipt in front of me, and I saw that my mother had not only ordered an expensive dinner, but also had desserts to take away. The amount exceeded $200. I stared at this receipt for a long time, trying to digest everything that had just happened, but instead the same thoughts were spinning in my head. Her calm expression when she demanded money from me, her confidence that I would pay, her complete disregard for everything that happened to me, to my house, to my life. Returning to my partially renovated apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sank wearily into a chair. The meeting at the cafe replayed over and over in my head. Mom's careless demand to pay $25,000. Her complete disregard for what Sarah had done. The way she handed me the bill without even asking if I'd pay it. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank, and opened the statements. In black and white, monthly transfers to Mom, $2,000, starting from the day my father died. Paying her utility bills, property taxes, and medical insurance. All this help started when she came to me after her father's funeral, crying, shaking, and complaining that she couldn't find a job because she was too old. Please, Sophia, I can't do this alone. Then I felt guilty. I went to my father when I was 14, leaving her and Sarah, and all these years I thought I should have stayed, that I should have taken care of her. But now, looking at the statements, I realized that Mom wasn't even trying to become independent. She lived at my expense, as she once lived off her father's alimony. I opened a new email and started typing. Mom, after today's conversation, I have made an important decision that takes effect immediately. I will no longer send you money or pay your bills. The financial support I provided was my choice, not my responsibility. I spent years trying to make amends for going to live with my dad, but now I realize that no amount of money can change our past. It ends now. From now on, you and Sarah will have to take care of yourself. Don't write to me about money anymore. Sophia. I clicked send before I could change my mind, then logged into my bank account and canceled all automatic payments to her accounts. The phone rang less than 15 minutes after I sent the email. I saw her name on the screen, but I didn't answer. He called again and again, but I didn't pick up the phone. In the end, I clicked on the reply button. How dare you? Her voice was shrill. I'm your mother. You have to take care of me after everything I've done for you. Is that how you repay me? Are you turning me off without warning? I took a deep breath before I spoke. You haven't done anything for me, Mom. You took it and took it. And when I needed a mother, when Sarah was destroying my house, when she was making my life unbearable, you always chose her, always justified her, always demanded more from me, allowed her to do whatever she wanted. I raised you. I fed you. My father raised me from the age of 14, I said calmly, even too calmly. He was the one who took care of me. And you lived on his alimony. And when they were over, you found a new sponsor. Now that sponsor is no longer me. There was silence on the other end. You're going to regret this, Sophia. Her voice turned as cold as steel. I won't let you treat me like that. I hung up and put the phone away. The phone immediately started ringing again, its insistent, sharp sound breaking into the silence of the apartment, reminding me that Mom wasn't going to make my decision so easily. I stared at the screen, at the flashing name, and instead of answering, I slowly pressed the lock button. At that moment, I felt not only liberation, but also a strange, unusual calmness. For the first time in many years, I was not constrained by guilt, nor tormented by the usual pressure of her expectations, her demands, her insatiable thirst for control. But she didn't stop. Almost immediately, messages began pouring in, first one, then another, and another, until the phone screen was filled with a furious stream of them. First on WhatsApp, short, demanding ones, "Unblock me immediately. We have to talk." Facebook instanced the message, "You ruined our family." Followed by a message from Sarah on Instagram, "How can you be so heartless? You'll regret it when you need help yourself." I blocked them one by one, methodically, without unnecessary emotions, but they found new ways to get to me, tirelessly making their way through all possible platforms, like the waters of a devastating flood, eroding any obstacles. They wrote to me on LinkedIn, on Telegram, and even left comments under old photos. But the worst part was that they started texting my friends. I found out about this when Alice, my best friend, sent me a screenshot of a message from my mom. "You know Sophia, right? Do you know how cruel she is? Did you know that she left her family in poverty, enjoying luxury?" I closed my eyes, clutching the phone in my hand, and took a deep breath. It was inevitable. Mom has always been able to manipulate people, always found a way to make herself look like a victim, to portray herself as an unhappy woman who was abandoned by an ungrateful daughter. But now I knew the truth. It didn't concern me anymore. However, I didn't want to take any chances. That same day, I went downstairs to Frank, our concierge, an elderly man with kind but penetrating eyes. "Frank," I said, trying to keep my voice level, but fatigue broke through in my voice anyway. "My mother and sister, they might try to come here." He frowned, folding his arms on the massive counter. "Are they threatening you?" "No," I shook my head. "But I don't want them to have access to the building. Not under any circumstances." He looked at me carefully, as if trying to understand the depth of the situation, and finally nodded. "I understand you, Miss Thompson. Don't worry, I will personally make sure that they are not allowed to enter." The next evening, when I returned from work, Frank met me at the entrance, raising his hand in a light gesture of greeting. "Your mother and sister were here about an hour ago," he said calmly. "They tried to convince me that they had your permission to come up, but I refused." "Thanks, Frank," I breathed, feeling gratitude rise inside. "Your sister." He hesitated, but continued anyway. "She's become quite loud. I had to threaten to call security before they left." I nodded, feeling neither surprise nor even much disappointment. It was expected. Sarah has always been like this. If she didn't get what she wanted, she would turn to tantrums, to tears, to loud accusations, hoping that the pressure would force people to give in to her. "Thank you," I repeated. "I really appreciate it." That evening, I transferred an additional amount to Frank for the Christmas bonus. He deserved it. I spent the following weeks rebuilding my apartment. I ordered new furniture, repainted the walls, replaced the broken appliances, and threw out the remnants of the chaos that Sarah had left behind. Every day my house looked more and more like the old one, but something had changed. He no longer felt like my refuge. The apartment that had been my safe place for so many years, where every morning began with the smell of coffee and muted sunlight, where memories of my father lived in every corner, now seemed alien to me. It was as if an invisible crack left after everything that had happened was gradually growing, turning the walls into something cold, devoid of comfort. Through mutual friends, I found out that Mom and Sarah were living off random money, moving from one relative to another, lying and borrowing sums that would never be returned. They complain to anyone who is willing to listen to them. They tell me how I abandoned them, but they don't say a word about how Sarah broke into my house, how she demanded money, how she tore my personal world to shreds. I've run into them a few times on the street. It was inevitable, because they lived nearby. Every time my mother tried to talk to me, Sarah alternated between pleading and threatening, sometimes in desperate pity, sometimes in anger. Sophia, Mom's voice was almost gentle. We're a family, you can't just leave us. I looked at her skillfully portrayed grief, and walked past without saying a word. Sophia. Sarah shouted another time, her voice shaking with anger. You're pathetic. Do you think you're better than us? You're nothing. I could hear her words shattering on the cold air behind me, but I didn't even look back. Each encounter only reinforced my resolve. One evening, lying in bed, I found myself flipping through websites with real estate ads. Modern apartments, tall buildings, strict security system, closed entrances. I wasn't just looking for a new home, I was looking for a new beginning. I had been looking at the advertisement for the sale of a spacious penthouse in an elite residential complex for a long time. Round-the-clock security. Private elevator. View of the city stretching to the horizon. But the most important thing was something else. No one will find me there. That's where I can finally start living for real. I'll call the realtor tomorrow. It's time to move forward. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.